Hello, and welcome to episode 54 of Design Curious Podcast. I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. Today on the podcast, we have another great guest, Masha Koyen, who is a copywriter. And so that's definitely something that you're going to need as you start out in your career, getting a website or creating lead magnets and all of those things. So we talk about that in the episode. And I'll tell you about Masha just a minute here, but don't forget, we have the quiz, we have downloads for you, we have all the information about My Design Mentor in the show notes. And so if you've never been, you can find the show notes on my website. So you're going to go to rwarddesign.com. You will go to the podcast tab at the top of my website. And then in that, you will scroll down and find today's episode. Click on that, and inside you'll have a breakdown of all the things we talk about in the episode, as well as tons and tons of links and downloads and all the extra stuff that you're going to want in that show notes. So you can do that every week and find all of the great information in the show notes. All right, now let me tell you a little bit more about Masha. She is a messaging strategist and copywriter. One client called her a word ninja because she has a way with words. She's the copywriter behind some kick-ass websites in the interior design industry, and you want data-driven strategic copy that'll grab your audience by the eyeballs and never let go. You're in the right place with Masha. She takes a strategic approach to crafting web copy that actually works and even has a signature framework called Reveal, which we talk about in the episode, for producing data-driven, brand-elevating web copy. She pores over research data to uncover the secrets of what makes your audience tick. Then she uses it to write copy that speaks directly to your client's deepest desires and wants, which is exactly what you're looking for. Not everybody has a way with words, and so that's why there are copywriters. We even address the issue of AI. A lot of people are using ChatGPT these days, and so we talk about that in the episode and why you're still going to need a copywriter, even with AI coming into play. All right, let's talk with Masha. You're now listening to Design Curious, a place where you, creative one, are here to learn about what it really is like to be an interior designer. And I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. If you're worried about how to succeed in a creative career, if you're ready to learn your next steps to become an interior designer, and if you want the satisfaction of doing something you love every day, you are in the right place. Grab a coffee, a notebook, and let's dig into today's episode. Hi, Masha. Welcome to Design Curious Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So for our audience, let's discuss a little bit how you got into your career of being a messaging strategist and copywriter.
Sure. So I have a marketing background. So I've been in marketing forever. I've been in marketing for 14 years. For 14 years, I was working with big firms like KPMG, Deloitte, doing their marketing for global and nationally. And then in 2019, pre-COVID, a year before COVID, I started my copywriting business after kind of sitting down and thinking, okay, I don't want to work for anyone anymore. I hardly ever see my kids. So I just said to myself, okay, I want to start something. And then realized that writing was always part of my jobs anywhere I worked. And, I have a professional writing degree from 20 years ago, and I always enjoyed writing and got into copywriting and pretty immediately niched down into website copywriting. So just, not all writing, but specifically website copywriting. And yes, it's been over 4.5 years since I've been running my business, like a copywriting agency, content vertical.
Okay. So what drew you to doing websites specifically as a copywriter?
I just loved telling stories about these businesses, and specifically with interior designers, because I didn't really get into interior design right away. I wish I could say it was like a strategic and intentional move, but it was not. It just happened. One of my first clients happened to be a decorator. She was like a real estate stager. And I really enjoyed that project. I was writing website copy for her and I really enjoyed it. So I just decided to continue with that. And why website copy? It's because I feel that people have a hard time telling their story eloquently, telling their story in a succinct way that it resonates. And I felt that it came naturally to me. So I said, why not? This is quite an in-demand service. And at that time, I didn't know that I was going to be an interior design website copywriter. So I said to myself, okay, this is like applicable to any industry. So why not? Thinking that I'm going to be working in all kinds of industries. I never looked back. I love writing website copy. Since then, I've up leveled and took a bunch of courses on website copy and the persuasive tactics, and decided to go all in, I guess, pretty much in the beginning 4.5 years ago with website copy.
Okay. So interesting. I can see how you niched into interior design, but like you have one client, then they refer you to another one, and then you kind of, before you know it, you're doing all designers and decorators. As you're working with these types of creatives, is there something that you see consistently that you love to bring forward for designers to really show on their websites, or how's it working with this particular niche?
They're all creative entrepreneurs, so they have an amazing story to tell. And most of them, I would say 90%, are not sure how to tell their story, or they're not sure how to separate themselves from everybody else. So over the years, I developed this signature process. I have this framework that I use to write website copy. It's a 6-step process. So it helps me really nail down the differentiator for these creative entrepreneurs and distill them in a way that actually resonates with their clients. So my clients go through this comprehensive process, and it's like a mini therapy session because, we peel the onions. I was like, well, what is it about your brand? And how did you get started? And who's your audience? Let's dig a little bit deeper. And all of a sudden you get this story, and I find ways to articulate it. So what I see often is, designers have an amazing story, but it's a lack of clarity of how to tell that story and who are they talking to. A lot of times people are kind of talking to everybody, and that saying, when you talk to everybody, you talk to no one. And that's what I see. And it's not just for interior designers. I think that's for a lot of service providers. It's the same thing. It's the lack of clarity and focus in terms of who they should be speaking to.
So what kind of mistakes, besides talking to a general audience and not a specific audience, do you see designers making on their websites?
I would say one of the biggest ones, but I do these web copy audits. So I talk about these things all the time because I seem to come across this thing all the time. It's, when you land on their website and the first thing that you see is above the fold, kind of very prime real estate in the online world. And all I see is an image, no words. And that's probably one of the biggest. Yes, your photos should speak volumes. Yes, your photos should speak for themselves, but you truly need words. Words and pictures work in tandem to deliver that message. Because I always give this example, like imagine if your dream client has like 100 tabs open. Would your website really stick out? There has to be words that resonate. So that's mistake number one. I feel like that's the biggest one, because it's not just to really attract and hook that ideal client, but it's also for SEO purposes. You really do need words for SEO. Google is still important. It's still the king. We still want to be found. So that's a biggie. Another one, I would say, listing way too many service options on their website. Like if you have, an e-design, and then you have a consultation, and then you have, a VIP service, and then designer for a day, designer on demand. So many options. And sometimes I see like 7 or 8 options. And what I always say is the last thing that we want to do is confuse our audience. So when they land on your website, sometimes our clients don't know what they want, just like from my own clients, designers clients as well, they land there and it leads to confusion. When you have way too many options, confusion leads to inaction. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want to have way too many options for our clients. We just want to have maybe like 4. Something reasonable, something that where you could say that each option is distinctly different, where it's immediately clear to your prospective client, oh, okay, this is what I want. This is probably for me. But when it's way too many options and they're kind of similar sounding ones, they're just confused. And sometimes they just walk away, they bounce from your website and decide not to reach out because they simply don't know, or they think, okay, I'll think about it and then I'll come back. they end up not coming back. So that's another one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really important. The overwhelm on the client side can deter
And you
them
want to
from
be,
hiring.
you want to be their guide. You want to show up as an expert, as the guide to say, okay, even if you don't know what you want to do next, I'll help you. I'll guide you in that process. So you can even, which leads me to my next point, a call to action. If your call to action, which is that main action that you want your visitors, your website visitors to take, if it's too vague or not clear enough, that's another mistake. It has to be immediately clear on your website. Okay, I've looked at everything that you wanted me to look at. What's next? What's the next step you want your audience to take? So be very super clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. I know some websites for other designers that I've landed on are really just like a virtual portfolio, basically. It's just showing their work and, talking about it, but it's not really directing you to take any action or that show you that you can even work with them. Like they barely have to contact us, So
yeah, which is another mistake, not having a call to action at all. How many times I've seen the websites that kind of, like you said, there's a bunch of work, which is beautiful, but what's next? Always keep in mind that your website needs to guide people to that critical step, whatever that step is for you. For some people, it's, reach out and book your consultation. For others is sign on to my newsletter or download my lead magnet or whatever it is, but you want to guide them to that action, to that call to action. So if you don't have them, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to know. Intuitively, they may, find themselves clicking on the contact us form, but you want to eliminate the thinking and the confusion on their part and have a call to action on every single page.
Well, good. So tell me a little bit about how you work with your clients. Like, I know that there's copywriting is what you do. There's also like website designers. And do you work in tandem with those designers sometimes? Kind of like how a client hiring us might need a designer and an architect, to work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that kind of a similar situation with the copywriter and website designer?
Exactly. It's exactly like that. Sometimes clients come to me, they already have a web designer. I would say it's 50-50 where the clients that hire me, they already have a web designer and their web designer, okay, give me content now. Okay, and they're like, oh, okay, now I need to find a copywriter because they're usually the bottleneck. They never think about messaging is like the last thing that they think about. Yeah. So that's how it usually starts, where they come with their own web designer. And then I have those clients that don't have a web designer and kind of see me as a one-stop shop because I have my own web designers that I trust. I have web designers that only work with interior designers, which is great. And then I'm kind of their one-stop shop person and I, communicate with web designers, make sure we're all on the same page. So there are two ways that you can start a project. I think like most copywriters would disagree with me, but there's no right or wrong. Most copywriters will say that you should be starting with copywriting. And yes, it is true. But there are benefits of starting with website too. So, for example, you have this incredible idea for a web design and your web designer comes up with a great mock-up and, my clients come to me with that mock-up and then I just make sure that I fit the copy in those spots. Sometimes it's a little harder to kind of do the copywriting like an afterthought, but both ways would work. So so I have my own web designers and I also work with clients' web designers, but copy is usually, so just to tell you a little bit about my process, research is where everything starts. We start with a discovery call. We're just like you guys, we get to know our clients and get to know if we're a fit, if we like each other. There has to be chemistry, vibe. And then after the discovery call and after all the logistics, like the contract and the invoicing is taken care of, that's when we start client questionnaire. So that's the one that I was referring to, like a therapy session. One of my clients called it a therapy session because it's a pretty in-depth questionnaire. Like I'm literally asking you everything from, who you are, how you started, who is your ideal client, what are their pain points, what are their aspirations, what do they like, what do they hate, what are some of their hesitations, what are some of the questions they ask. Like no rock is, what is that saying? No stone is left unturned. So I get to know you really in depth, you and your audience. And then after that, this comprehensive questionnaire, that's when we get into the strategy call. And that's where I dig a little bit deeper and I'm like, okay, tell me more. I know you said that, you create beautiful and functional environments, but everybody else is saying the same thing. Yeah. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's find out what is that differentiator that you have. And then after the strategy session, that's essentially when the project starts. I have this reveal framework. So starts with research and discovery. I get to know your brand voice, because the beauty of copywriting is basically the writing sounds like you, because a copywriter is taking the time to really understand how do you sound, what kind of tone do you have, what kind of voice do you use, in your social media and your marketing. So my research goes through everything. I'm kind of studying everything about you and how you sound and how you want to come across to your ideal clients. And then we go into uncovering those sticky messaging bits, like, what is your differentiator? What value do you provide? What should we articulate in copy? And then it goes into competitive analysis. And then my favorite step is the voice of customer data. That's where I interview your clients. I basically take 5 of your clients, hop on a call with them, and get the juiciest customer testimonials, the juiciest stories. Because sometimes, not everybody is good at giving testimonials. You work with a client for a year designing their house, and then at the end you get, she was so good. Oh my God, but there's so much more. I want to hear the emotion behind it. So that's where I come in and I help you get those really great customer testimonials and the stories that we can then, those audience insights that we can then inject into your website copy. So it really resonates with those clients that you want to attract. And then the rest of the steps is like providing you with outline for the copy. So, and that's very helpful for web designers, because you basically have this clarity as to what's going to go on every page before I write a word of text. We get to align. Here's what's going to go on your about page. Here's what's going to be on your home page. Here's why we do it in this way, in this order. And then writing is the last part. Like, there's so much research and discovery and analysis, and writing is like the very last step in my process.
Okay. I like that you have that reveal acronym for your process.
I had to do, it took me a while to come up with it. It took me like 6 months, but it was a lot of work. But, because I went all in with interior design, I'm like, okay, it has to resonate with designers.
Yeah. So can you review that one more time, like what those letters all stand for?
Yes. So reveal. R is for research and discovery. E for extracting key messaging. V is for voice of customer. E is for evaluating competition. A is for architecture of content. And L is for language and launch.
Okay. Perfect. Yes. Love that. Okay. So besides then the website, do you also help them with lead magnets or email welcome sequences and things like that? Since you have all of that information already, I think that would
exactly because we cover so much upfront. I now have kind of this ammunition to them write all kinds of writing assets, marketing assets, which is, like you said, lead magnets and email sequences and nurture sequences and welcome sequences and blogging. And these are usually go in my retainer packages. So I usually start with a website copy. And then from there, they may need social. I don't do much with social media, to be honest. There's just like algorithms are changing. There's so much. I do still for a couple of retainer clients, but I never advertise that anymore. And, come September, when my new website is going to be done, social media is not going to be there. But so blogging, all kinds of writing, marketing assets.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Because I feel like that's also part of the equation with copywriting.
Of course.
Like translate all of that to help nurture the client into our processes. So then can you also help with like onboarding documents and things like that? Because we like have a welcome packet that we give to our clients. And so we like to basically reiterate a lot of stuff that's on the website, like our process and all the stuff like that, And I think it'd be nice to have a copywriter like help formulate that as well. So like they can
honestly, I would love if a client came to me with that kind of assignment, but I feel like in this industry, interior designers go to either they download these kind of assets and then, make it their own and, make certain tweaks, or they buy it off various, service providers that are in business of these templated approach. I would love to work on that kind of project because I truly believe that every touch point that you have with your clients, whether it's just simple email updates or those welcome guides or welcome books, whatever you want to call them, those documents that you exchange with your clients at the beginning of that relationship, if they have your voice, that's probably the best thing, because that you're setting the scene with these kind of documents. You're setting the scene about what it's like to work with you as a designer. And it's not like a dry contract. Like even the contract, you can still make it fun. You can still inject your personality into your contract. You can still have all the important bits there to kind of make sure that you are protected from both ends. But, why not make it sound like you, make it have your brand flavor injected into these documents, which are kind of very corporate and dry. I'm developing a couple of products at the moment. So this could be the next thing that I start offering.
Yeah, I think that would be a valuable tool. Yeah, just to help the client onboarding process and really solidify that message that you start with the website, So,
yeah, absolutely. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so speaking of voice and like how, you're speaking to your audience and you want to sound like the designer is doing it themselves. What's your opinion about AI? I know we didn't talk about this ahead of time. It's a really hot topic this year, but like I know that people are wondering, like copywriters and Chat GPT, like what's happening with that?
Oh my God. It is a loaded question. That's like the talk of the town. Everybody wants to talk about ChatGPT. So I'll tell you one thing. I think ChatGPT is a really valuable resource if you use it right, if you're not relying for it, because you have to understand, like, well, the thing about ChatGPT, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. So basically, if your prompt is not succinct, if your prompt is not clear, you're going to get something generic, and everybody else can do the same thing. So you should not be relying solely on ChatGPT, but it could definitely help. Like I use it religiously for research. I use it for creating like fun things like focus groups. I'm like, okay, get me in the room with 5 ideal customers, and they are this high-end designer with such and such, and I give really vivid details about each designer, and then I throw in a topic. I'm kind of like a focus group, I guess, organizer, and I'm like, okay, chat amongst yourself about this. And the things that pop up is pretty incredible, because you're literally sitting at the table with 5 of your ideal clients. So you could do the same thing for interior designers. You could do the same thing. You could do it for research. You could ask ChatGPT about, okay, what are the real pain points when it comes to such and such, and give it a situation. You could use it for social media captions, but you have to be very clear in terms of your prompts. You have to tell ChatGPT what it is that you want. How do you want to sound? Make sure you sound like this and not that. Make sure you mention those things. You have to be very, very detailed. Sometimes it's just easier to write it from scratch. Yeah. Which is another way of using it. Write it first, or write it in a bullet point form, and then feed it into ChatGPT and say, okay, can you refine this? But refine it and like something that I always use, like refine it in an elegant way or in a sophisticated way, or using such and such, or make it sound like, I don't know, someone, like think of like a famous person who is very vocal celebrity, or like authority of some sort, and make it sound like Beyonce, and something like that. And it'll capture the various nuances. And so I think you have to be very smart, strategic about how you use it. Don't avoid it, because it's here, and I think it's here to stay. I think AI is supposed to help us be a little bit more efficient, but like it's not gonna do the work for you. It will, but the quality is questionable. And if you're using it for this, somebody else is doing the same thing and using those same sources. Well, up to, what is it, up to 2021, I think. That's how it works. Okay. Because ChatGPT is using, it only has access to information up to 2021. So I would say definitely use it to help yourself. For certain things that take a lot of time to do, it could cut your time in half. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you for that input. I just felt remiss if we didn't talk about using AI in some capacity. The little bit that I've dabbled with it, just to help like write some difficult emails or things like that, I do find that the more specifics I feed it, the better the result. So like you really do want to give, don't just say like,
oh, write me an email about saying hi to the new
Right.
client, you know, like,
Right. Like give it details that it can use, it or he or she, I don't know what it is,
uh-huh.
but it can use to actually make your language and whatever you're writing a bit more colorful. You know what it's good for? It's good for subject lines. It's good for headlines, titles, for your
Mm,
lead magnets, for your calls to action. Sometimes I use it to create, okay, like, those learn more buttons
yeah.
on the website. I'm like, okay, give me something different. And I give it a few ideas in terms of what I'm looking for. Like I want, with this call to action, I want to compel people to take the action. I don't want it to be just generic. And I would ask, like, give me a list of 10 ideas. And it
Mm-hmm.
would give it to me. And I'm not saying I'm going to use it as is. I'm going to continue tweaking it until I arrive at something. But I think ChatGPT is an excellent starting point for everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it kind of like help you break through that writer's block or just,
exactly.
brainstorming and things like that. Yeah.
Brainstorming. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just get
absolutely.
some
Yeah.
inspiration to take
Mm-hmm.
that as a starting point and then really manipulate your copy to sound like you or just take it in a
Yeah.
different direction. Yeah.
And you can use it as a almost like instead of Google, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to sift through so many things. If you Google,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's easier to just go into ChatGPT and search, but you do have to keep in mind that it's not going to be like the freshest of information because it's
Right.
only up to 2021.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
you have to take that in consideration. But if you're looking for a list, like I've used it in the past for to search really incredible voice of customer data from various interior design magazines. Like I would say something like, I'm looking for a comment or I'm looking for a testimonial or some type of quote that a designer gave or a homeowner that was featured
Mm.
in a interior design magazine. And sometimes it would give me a publication, what year, the quote. That's
Oh,
excellent
okay.
material.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Huh.
great. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Great. So, do you think that if an interior design wanted to DIY their copy, that maybe that's a good way to start it? Or what is some other advice that you can give to someone who is looking to DIY maybe some of their copy?
Yeah, DIYing is absolutely fine. You just have to be very clear in terms of who your audience is, because this is a starting point for every copywriter and it should be a starting point for you too. So you really should have this complete understanding, which is why I do those voice of customer client interviews, because I get to
Mhm.
talk to your clients and really understand what are their pain points. But who says you can't do the same thing, or you can't hire your VA to do the same thing? It's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
get one of your past clients to hop on a half an hour call and really ask them strategic questions. Well, what is it about that experience with me or with the interior designer that you loved? What is it? Can you be more specific? Can you provide some examples? So I would say absolutely fine for DIYing. I'm actually developing a copy template product for interior designers for
Oh,
those who
great.
want to DIY. So this week I had two designers who came to me. It's like, yep, I'll be the beta tester for you. I'm like, yes, awesome.
Nice.
That's coming in the fall. But for DIY, that's perfect. So start with really understanding your customer pain points, their aspirations. That's where you would start with. And then have an idea of what you want to say. Be clear in terms of what your differentiator is. There's a certain way that you should be. So why don't I just tell you? There's a certain way that your information should show up on a, let's say, on a homepage. At the very top, you should have that very clear, unique value proposition, which is, who you are, what you do, what kind of value you provide. It doesn't have to say all of those things, but it has to pique your ideal client's interest and it has to
Yeah.
be immediately clear. So that's where that understanding, those audience insights come into play, because when your ideal client lands on your website, it needs to be immediately clear to that client that they are in the right place and
Mm-hmm.
you are the designer that's able to help them. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are clear on who your dream client is and what are their pain points, you can translate that into that unique value proposition. So at the very top, you will have your beautiful image, unique value proposition, and a call to action. That's where you start. So if you're DIYing it, the next step should always be, not always, but I prefer if it's social proof, because people tend to trust that. You need
Okay.
that something that signals trust, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
customer testimonial, or because I believe in actually strategically sprinkling your customer testimonials across your site rather than sort of keeping them hidden away on a page, because nobody's going to go and look for them. They have to just appear as your client,
Yeah.
as your audience is kind of using, I guess, engaging with your content. So then there's going to be social proof with it, whether it's your features in interior design publications or, customer testimonial, something of that sort, something that signals, yep, other people have trusted me. Interior design publications trusted me. I spoke on those podcasts. That's why you like often you see those badges or logos of recognized publications. So that's your social proof section. And then there has to be a section about you. So your homepage, think of your homepage as kind of like a gateway to the rest of your site. Give just a little bit of information and then guide them to explore your other pages.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're DIYing them, keep in mind that you are the guide. You are the host of this party. Whoever is arriving there, you have to tell them where to go, what time is dinner, what time is the d'oeuvres, what are we serving. So you have to provide just enough information for them to go to the next step. And it has to be compelling so they actually want to reach out.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Really good advice. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So if someone is looking, then maybe they know that they can't DIY and they want to work with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 ways. I am on my website content vertical and just fill out my contact form and then it'll trigger all kinds of project management softwares and it'll appear in your inbox and we'll get in touch. We'll hop on a discovery call. So it's contentvertical.com and I'm sure you're going to put it in the notes.
Yes.
Or you can just follow me on Instagram. I am there, at least 3-4 times a week, always providing advice, always sharing messaging strategy tips, copywriting tips, marketing tips, everything for interior designers. That's all I do. I do not serve anybody else. I am an interior design website copywriter.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And it is Masha.copywriter.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And we'll have that in the show notes as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Masha, for coming on and talking with us so candidly about the process and that you just love working with designers, which is, a unique group unto ourselves. So
absolutely. Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. We'll talk to you later. So I love that conversation with Masha. As you can see, a copywriter is very important for getting your messaging right on your website. Sometimes you only have a few minutes to grab people's attention when they're perusing all of your colleagues and your website, and you want them to stay. You want to speak to the right person that is your ideal client. And so a copywriter knows exactly how to do that. And then as well, I would say take advantage of them for working on your lead magnets, your welcome sequence, and your email campaigns and all that stuff, because you really want to nurture the relationship with your client, and a copywriter can keep a consistent voice throughout that process, and it's going to sound very cohesive. All right, and as I said before, you can find all the links to Masha and all the free downloads that I have in the show notes. You can always contact me at Our Word Design on Instagram, and I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and I will keep making these episodes. Coming up, we have another interview next week, so stick around for that, and until then, stay creative. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode, please leave a rating and a review. This helps me reach other curious creatives like you. If you have a topic request or would like to contact me, simply head over to my website, ourworddesign.com, or email me at podcast@ourworddesign.com.